So I will start those. I will now open the public hearing on CAR 65-4-4. This hearing is being conducted in accordance with the Kansas Administrative Procedures Act. I want to confirm the process which has been followed, which is required by CAPA. The regulations, organization style, orthography, and grammar have been approved by the Secretary of Administration. The regulation has been approved in writing by the Attorney General as to legality. The regulation, along with the economic impact statement, has been submitted to the Director of Budget for review and the accuracy and completeness of the agency economic impact statement. On August 17th, 2023, a notice of today's hearing on the proposed amended CAR 65-4-4 was published in the Kansas Register. I note this is well in advance of the 60-day required by law. In addition, the proposed amended regulation was submitted to the Legislative Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulations and Kansas Legislative Research Department, which reviewed the proposed amended regulation on October 10th, 2023, and the committee had no comment. In regards to today's hearing, I first want to confirm what will be admitted into the record. We are making of this hearing, I want to include the notice of hearing published on August 17th, 2023, the regulation approved by the Secretary of Administration and the Attorney General, the economic impact statement, the report of the October 10th, 2023 meeting of JCAR, and the October 17th, 2023 letter from the KLRD. Ms. Murray, do you have any written comments from the public being received prior to today's hearing?
No, I do not.
And I will now open up the hearing for any verbal comments from any member of the public. No comments? All right, this will conclude the introduction of verbal comments at today's hearing. We will now consider board action on the proposed amendment to CAR 65-4-4. At this time, I will consider any board discussion or motion to go into closed session or to take action on the proposed amendment. Does any board member wish to make a comment on the proposed amended regulation? Does any board member wish to make a motion to go into closed session or to take action on the proposed amendment? All right. And so, Jan, a motion for?
Yeah, we do need a motion before we can vote on the motion.
All right. Does any board member wish to make a motion? Oh, no, or to take action. So is that our action, is to propose the?
Yeah, I mean, it would relate to whether you're adopting the amended regulation or not.
Gerard, would you like to make a motion?
I would like to make a motion to accept Regulation KAR 65-4-4, notice to the board in its updated version.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor say aye.
Oh, and we'll need to do a roll call on the,
Oh, it says to do it after we vote.
and is Sheena, is she on? And
She's on the
I'm
call.
here.
So Jan, if you would proceed with the roll call.
Dr. Lozada,
Aye.
Dr. Bircher,
Present. Aye.
Dr. Nagaraja,
Aye. Can you guys hear me? Hello?
We cannot hear you.
you.
Can you
Can you
see
hear
me?
us? Now we can hear
I
you.
can- Okay. Yeah, aye.
And Dr. DeAnda.
Aye.
And then do I proceed as usual or just go right into the certificate of adoption? Okay. So Ms. Murray has prepared a certificate of adoption of our approval of the amended regulation today, which will record the roll call vote. I will sign the certificate of adoption on behalf of the board. In closing, I would like to make reference to the reasons the board has adopted this regulation. This is a straightforward regulation. There are no economic or environmental impacts. With that, I will officially close the hearing on CAR 65-4-4, the regulation along with the certificate of adoption and economic impact statement will be submitted to the Secretary of State for publication. All right, moving along. So we are going to move along to the next agenda item, which is the CAR 65-5-4. And so I will now open the public hearing on CAR 65-5-4. This hearing is being conducted in accordance with the Kansas Administrative Procedures Act. I briefly want to confirm the process which has been followed, which is required by CAPA. The regulations, organization, style, orthography, and grammar have been approved by the Secretary of Administration. The regulation has been approved in writing by the Attorney General as to legality. The regulation, along with the economic impact statement, has been submitted to the Director of Budget for review and the accuracy and completeness of the agency economic impact statement. On August 17th, 2023, a notice of today's hearing on the proposed amended CAR 65-5-4 was published in the Kansas Register. I note this is well in advance of the 60 days required by law. In addition, the proposed amended regulation was submitted to the Legislative Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulations and Kansas Legislative Research Department, which reviewed the proposed amended regulation on October 10th, 2023. The committee had no comment. In regard to today's hearing, I want to confirm what will be admitted into the record we are making of this hearing. I want to include the notice of hearing published on August 17th, 2023, the regulation approved by the Secretary of Administration and the Attorney General, the economic impact statement, the report of the October 10th, 2023 meeting of JCAR, and the October 17th, 2023 letter from the KLRD. Ms. Murray, have any written comments from the public been received prior to today's hearing?
No, there have not.
And I will open up the hearing for any verbal comments from any member of the public. No comments. This will conclude the introduction of the verbal comments at today's hearing. We will now consider board action on the proposed amendment to CAR 65-5-4. At this time, I will consider any board discussion or motion to go into closed session or to take action on the proposed amendment. Does any board member wish to make a comment on the proposed amendment regulation? No comments. Does any board member wish to make a motion to go into closed session or to take action on the proposed amendment?
Would I say I move for action on the amendment, for what? Adoption of KAR 65-5-4.
Second. Oh, yes, any seconds?
Second.
And Ms. Murray, if you'd like to go into roll call vote.
Dr. Lozada,
Aye.
Dr. Bircher,
Aye.
Dr. Nagaraja,
Aye.
and Dr. DeAnda.
Aye.
Ms. Murray has prepared a certificate of adoption for our approval of the amended regulation today, which will record the roll call vote. I will sign the certificate of adoption on behalf of the board. In closing, I would like to make reference to the reasons the board has adopted this regulation. This is a straightforward regulation. There are no economic or environmental impacts. With that, I will officially close the hearing on CAR 65 5-4. The regulation, along with the certificate of adoption and the economic impact statement, will be submitted to the Secretary of State for publication. I want to congratulate the board because those two have been quite a burden to get through the system. So congratulations. We're checking it off the list finally. All right. Any modifications to the agenda at this time?
I would like to add a second item for my report, and that is to present the ARBO report on organized crime. I'm sorry, not ARBO, National Board of Examiners report on organized crime.
Thank you. We'll move forward with the approval of the minutes from the July 2023 meeting. Do I have a motion for approval?
Motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? All opposed, same sign. And we have approval of those minutes.
September minutes also to look at.
Oh.
September 9th.
So we will move on to the review and approval of the September 2023 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes as stated.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. And we do have approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Let's move forward with our reciprocities. Will Dr. Sullivan be available today?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. I'm just pulling up your application. Do any board members have any questions for Dr. Sullivan?
I do. If you'll give me a moment, please.
Okay.
Hi, Dr. Sullivan. I'm Dr. Lozada. I have a few questions for you.
Okay.
I noticed on your application, your letters of reference, you indicated Dr. Franken.
Mhm.
How is it that you know Dr. Franken?
I actually started as a technician with Dr. Franken and Dr. Arnold at Vision Care Associates in Shawnee. So it was through that process that I got to know both of those doctors.
And how about Dr. Galantine?
Dr. Galantine is working at Vision Care Associates as well, and I got to know him through the interview process and through shadowing and working with him as well there.
Okay, so you did shadow with him.
Yes.
Was this when you were prior to graduating?
No, this was just recently, about a month ago.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Sullivan? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the reciprocity application for Dr. Sullivan.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. Your application for reciprocity has been accepted.
Thank you, board.
Thank you. All right, is Dr. Thompson available?
If she's not, I would suggest that we move on and come back when she is available.
Oh, sure. All right, we will put that on hold until Dr. Thompson is available. Next. I should present this as a hearing, correct, Tim? So in the matter of,
Yes, and I think procedurally too, since you were the investigative member, you'll need to recuse.
oh, okay.
I guess we'd go to Dr. Nagaraja to run it, but she's not here, so maybe Dr. Lozada to run the hearing.
I'd like to call the hearing of the case entitled in the matter of Jordan Waltney, OD, board case number 2024-02 to order. Note that the hearing is being held pursuant to Kansas Administrative Procedures Act. Note the appearance of the board's legal counsel and the name of the respondent, Dr. Waltney. Is he available?
No, and she wasn't required to appear as part of this. She was given the opportunity.
Thank you. Note the identity of the board's investigative member is Dr. Bircher. We are here to consider a proposed stipulation and consent order and ask the board's legal counsel to present the stipulation.
Yes, thank you. And the facts that the parties have stipulated to are summarized as follows. That Dr. Gwaltney renewed her license on June 1st of 2022 and is currently set to expire May 31st of 2024. She contacted the board in May of this year regarding her inability to obtain 24 hours of acceptable continuing education for the first year of her renewal period. While she did obtain 24 hours, she was 5 hours short of the live CE requirement set by regulation. She did present information regarding the family tragedy that she suffered, which necessitated a temporary cessation of practice and impacted her ability to obtain the number of CE hours that live CE hours required under the regulation. What we have agreed to resolve, well, and I note too that it constitutes a violation of KSA 65-1509A and the applicable regulation KAR 6556 subsection B relating to the live requirement. The statute requires 24 hours of annual CE. In turn, we have a violation of the Act, which forms the basis for discipline under KSA 65-1517H. What the parties have agreed to resolve this matter is a fine of $100. We also recite that Dr. Gwaltney, based on what she's presented and the circumstances here, is not required to make up any live CE hours for the first annual period of her 2-year renewal. And on that, if there are no questions, I would request approval of the stipulation that's been presented.
Do any board members have questions for legal counsel? Do any board members have questions for the investigative member, Dr. Bircher? If there are no questions, do one of the board members wish to make a motion? And since Dr. Bircher is the investigative member, I would ask that she not.
Okay, so I would, so for approval of the, a vote for approval of the stipulation and final order of Jordan Gwaltney.
We have a motion, and I will second. All in favor say aye.
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 It's okay under CAPE if she's not available to vote. There's no quorum requirement, so it's sufficient.
The motion passes. Thank you.
All right. Report of the president. Mostly I have been working with our secretary treasurer and Jan on some policy changes, which all will be touched upon later in the meeting. So I will default to when we catch up on those. I will also hold on the report of the vice president until she's available. Let's go ahead and move right into your report, Gerard.
Thank you, Dr. Bircher. I have two items to discuss. The first item is review of the complaint form. Pardon? That one. The complaint form has been updated. Originally, it was a project between former board member Dr. Durst and myself. What we did was to update some of the wording. We went back and forth. She made some, I believe I may have made the first changes to one section. She made changes to a different section, and then we traded, and the board members have the final version. Are there any questions regarding the changes that have been made?
The only question I had is, do you think it's relevant to add a section to determine if the person making the allegation is the patient? And I ask because that depends on if we can request records.
Ask your question again, please.
So we have a form to fill out on who is making a complaint to the board, but we do not know on the form if the person making the complaint is also the patient.
I'm going to refer that to Mr. Resner. I think there's I believe the reason that we made that change had to do with anonymous complaints when Dr. Durst and I first discussed this.
And so I had issues with the previous investigation because the patient was non-English speaking and the daughter filled out the form and I didn't have a HIPAA release for the patient because the daughter signed the form.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. The form, as I'm looking at it, I mean, it does have a place where you can identify or ask to identify the patient. I don't know, the form has a spot for it, but it does ask that. Then to your point, the release, it's personal to the person making the complaint, not to the actual patient. So, I mean, I think we could make some slight modifications, or we could have a standalone HIPAA release that is completed as part of this. We could build it in the form, or it could be something, Jan, that if it's a non-patient complaint, then you could send the complainant or the patient a release form to be signed before anything can be done moving forward, I suppose.
I think those are good suggestions. Thank you, Dr. Bircher. I mean, we didn't consider that, Dr. Durst and I. So I would suggest that we add the suggestion made by Mr. Resner that a HIPAA form be included. My only question for the board is, do we want to have any kind of wording regarding that on the complaint form, such as, please complete the attached HIPAA form? I think it would be helpful, just so that people are aware,
I'll forget otherwise.
right? Ms. Marie, could you make that change, please? Would the board members like to vote to approve at this point, or would you prefer to wait to see the modification?
I'm okay moving forward. Do I need to make a motion? I think so.
Yes.
I move to approve the complaint form with the addition that a HIPAA form be attached.
And that we ask that the HIPAA form be completed on the complaint form.
And that we ask that the HIPAA form be completed.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, so we have approval of the complaint form pending changes done by Ms. Murray.
Thank you, everyone. The second item that I'd like to discuss, I forgot to mention during my ARBO report over the summer, and it was actually one of the best presentations I've heard at an ARBO meeting, and it was a meeting regarding organized crime and test taking given by the head of security for the National Board, who's a former FBI agent. It was pretty shocking what he said. He informed us that cheating on what are called high-stakes examinations is now a $1 billion a year enterprise. It's very well organized. Tends to be hacker groups out of the countries of Iran and Russia who break into test centers, get test questions, test formats, and then they actually advertise on gaming programs, blatantly advertise that the materials are available and for sale. This is very important now for optometry because National Board has agreed to a policy of 6 times maximum before you're no longer allowed to take the National Board exam, before you're disqualified. And so the concern at National Board is that as an individual approaches attempt 5 and particularly attempt 6, they will be tempted to pass by any means possible. So the security at National Board has increased tremendously. That said, there's still lots of cheating that occurs. National Board had a report of cheating occurring at one of the Pearson test centers. They gave us the layout of the Pearson Center. It's essentially a circular room with 2 desks in the center. There's an individual sitting at each desk. They are facing cubicles in a semicircle. I think there's 12 people. So there's 24 candidates, 2 proctors. There's cameras above each cubicle, and they are watching what is occurring, and cheating still occurs. The way that the cheating occurs is that one of the individuals who is the proctor is compromised, and they actually had heard of a compromised individual, sent in someone undercover who managed to get a photograph of what is done. One of the techniques to reduce cheating is that the camera on your computer is turned on, and obviously the computer is the test center computer. So the individual has a mouse, they're reading the questions, they're answering the questions. If they're not using the mouse, they're using the trackpad to mark the responses. But because this individual was compromised, the photograph that they came out with was a person sitting at a computer, the candidate, and they appear to be taking the examination. But again, the camera off a computer has a very narrow field of view, and off to the side, there was a person, a second person, with their hand moving the cursor and answering questions. So, well organized. I had a lot more information, but unfortunately I lost my report. So all I can do is report on what I remember. Do you remember more from that presentation, Ms. Murray?
I think you covered the gist of it with the second person sitting beside them, taking the exam for them. Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that was really surprising. So obviously that test center was closed. This is in all fields. This is anybody who has a license, architects, engineers, doctors, lawyers. But I think the key takeaway is that it's a $1 billion a year industry, quite widespread. And so as an agency, I would say that we need to be as vigilant as we always are regarding test scores, authenticity, etc. That's all from my report. Thank you.
Any report from the public member?
I don't have anything to report. Thank you.
And I would like to backtrack to report of the vice president.
I have no report at this time.
Thank you. Jan, the floor is yours.
Okay. Okay, so I have trade names, and the first one on my list is just to do a consent approval for Dr. Heath Holland and Jeanette Holland, Holland Eye Clinic in Baser. They opened up a new practice location. Dr. Lozada tentatively approved this pending full board approval. So Dr. Hollands could open up their new practice. And so,
Would anyone like to make a motion?
I move to approve the trade name of Holland Eye Clinic
Do I have,
The additional location.
at the additional location.
do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And so the trade name has been approved for Charles Health Holland and Jeanette Holland for Holland Eye Clinic at the new location. I'm going to interrupt you here, Jan, and I'm going to create a new action item. So this means that we are going to bullet this next conversation and come back to it at the next meeting. We have a lot of trade name applications that are coming in all year round that are required to wait until a board meeting for approval. So I'd like the board members to consider assigning one board member, and likely Tim, for review of the trade name, review of the business information, so that we can tentatively approve these prior to the next meeting. So that would be a policy that we'd like to consider, and then we will have a more formal presentation and hopefully approval next meeting. Do you have comments on that, Tim?
Yeah, well, I think my only other thought would be, if you do that, make it clear that it's conditional. I think as long as I think you have enough reservation there that it's subject to the approval of the full board, it's conditional. You're not creating any kind of interest that would be, problematic if you take it away. But I mean, if they're relying on it and then they're expending funds or whatever to market or, signage, whatever it may be, I think that would be the concern. But as long as it's clear that it's conditional and, warned.
This is challenging because I feel like the trade names that I've been introduced to are not straightforward at all, and other board members are privy to different information, which can often challenge them. And so that was my one concern moving forward with this type of policy is, having everyone's input.
Yeah, I mean,
What would the advantage be for having conditional? I mean, if you have to get full board approval anyway, what does the conditional approval allow?
Ideally, 80% of these are just new address. Everything has already been approved prior, and that way the optometrist is not held up financially from running their business.
So are these going to be particular ones like the Hollands? They opened up a new practice. Those are the ones that you're going to be looking at? Or are you going to be looking at brand spanking new ones that?
That's what we'll be presenting at the next meeting.
I did get approached yesterday from somebody that wanted to know if they were going to use their name, but there was an, eye clinic, but there was another, Smith Dentistry, and they were wanting to know if the board would approve their Smith Eye Care, even though there was a Smith Dentistry in the same town. And I told him that he would need to submit a trade name and let the board approve.
And my thought is that would be at the discretion of the appointed board member.
Okay.
The board member could say, yes, I approve this pending the board meeting, or no, this needs to go to the board meeting prior for approval.
that's a good point, yeah.
I'd like to go back to Dr. DeAnda's point. One of the other things that will happen is that this will increase the efficiency of the board. We are meeting multiple times per year for Teams meetings to approve trade names, which is one of our responsibilities for this reason, just as what we just discussed. Some of these trade names are very straightforward, very easy, but they still require Ms. Murray to organize a meeting for us to set aside time, for us to find a time that works for everybody, go through the actual process. And so this is going to be much, much more straightforward. So I like the idea very much.
So I will intend on presenting information through Mrs. Murray to everyone to review prior to the next meeting. Thank you for letting me interrupt, Jan.
That's okay. So, well, then it goes to the next one on here. It's delegating me authority to approve corporate names that are not really a trade name that they're not practicing under. And I gave you the example online of one that they're practicing under, I can't even remember what it was now, but they're practicing under their name, but the corporate name is going to be something entirely different, and they will not be practicing under that name. But they need the certificate from me saying that it's got board approval before they can get the Secretary of State and all their other stuff done. That makes sense.
And so, Tim, I didn't understand the implications of this. So I was hoping you'd fill us in.
Yeah, so when someone wants to form a professional corporation, part of what they have to do is obtain a certificate from the board, certificate of good standing for the applicant or the incorporator. In addition, it reflects that the corporate name has been approved by the board. But if they're not using the corporate name as a trade name, which is what you all have historically focused on, I think the issue is, do you care if they're not using it in practice, if the corporate name itself is being approved? And so that's, it holds up the process, Jan, as I understand it, that
Right.
they have to wait on the board to approve their trade name, and that's the point in time where you approve the certificate that goes along with the corporate filing, which they're not using publicly other than a filing with the Secretary of State.
And most of the time, it's the same name, so it's not an issue, but this one, he's got two different practices, and he's wanting one name to encompass both practices. But the name he's wanting, he will not.
So Dr. Lindeman needs approval from the board to have.
He needs a certificate from the board stating that the name has been approved, even though he's not practicing under that name.
Clear as mud.
So what you would be doing is just delegating the authority to issue the certificate to Jan in the circumstances where the corporate name is different than the trade name that's going to be used in practice.
And the corporate name will never be seen in the light of day, as far as the public would know.
Okay.
I can't think of a good reason why
Yeah.
that would be an issue. I mean, if the licensee is in good standing, the corporate name it doesn't really matter.
So is this something we need to vote on?
Yeah, well, I think what's being proposed is essentially a policy delegating this authority to the executive director to make that transaction.
And can we create a policy now, or do I have to propose a policy to be approved next time?
No, you can do it now, and it would just be a motion to delegate the authority to approve corporate names which are not trade names to the executive director. And issue the certificate of good standing when appropriate.
So I would like to make a motion to delegate the authority for the executive officer to approve corporation names for Secretary of State that are not practice names.
And issue the certificate of good standing where.
And to issue the certificate of good standing. Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ms. Murray, you now have the authority for approval.
You.
Before Ms. Murray continues on her agenda, I am going to return to reciprocities. I believe Dr. Lori Thompson is available.
Yes, I'm here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I need to pull up your files. All right. So Dr. Thompson is available today for her application for reciprocity for a Kansas state license. Do I have any board members with questions?
Yes, Dr. Bircher, this is Dr. Lozada. Dr. Thompson, I'd like to ask a few questions that were on your application. I noticed that you have obtained a District of Columbia license, and you did so in 2022. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is your license current?
Yes.
Are you practicing in the District of Columbia?
I have not up to this point.
Do you intend to practice in the District of Columbia?
It's more there as a safety net. The group that I work with does have one office out there. And so since we just have one office out there, sometimes it's hard to find fill-in or if we have a provider that leaves. And so they asked if I would mind getting that license so that if we did, in the event, need me to go out there, that I could go out there. And so I said I didn't mind doing the legwork and getting it done. So that's what I did.
You currently live in Colorado?
I do.
And so you would fly to Washington, D.C. to work in one of the locations?
If it made sense. So, I mean, I can go out there we only have one office there. So if I have somebody that's going to be gone for an entire week, then it makes sense. I wouldn't go out there for a day, but.
And you are currently in practice, is that correct?
Yes. Well, I mean, not today, but usually.
Yes, obviously. What
Yeah.
what city are you practicing in?
I'm in Colorado Springs.
Colorado Springs. How many hours per week are you in practice in Colorado Springs?
Probably 20 to 25, 2 to 3
Great.
days.
And are you at another location?
Sometimes I go to our location in Oklahoma and help out there. Again, not just for one day, but if I'm going for, a week. I grew up in Oklahoma, and so that's where my parents live and my family lives. So I go out there a bit. So I don't have necessarily intentions on moving to Kansas permanently, but keeping my options open for my future. I don't necessarily want to work full time forever. So having some friends that live there and being able to fill in and do different things in their offices is just something that we've discussed for the future. So I'm just laying some groundwork in advance.
So I heard you correctly, you work 20 to 25 hours per week. That's not full-time.
That's how many hours I'm in clinic. I do some administrative work as well. So
the remaining, and that brings you to the 40 hours per week?
sometimes more. You understand how administrative work
Yes.
administrative work goes.
So there's, and let's see, so you're licensed in DC, Colorado, Oklahoma. And in DC and Oklahoma, you may take a flight to work in one of the locations as needed. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is that the idea behind the Kansas licensure?
It is.
How often do you travel to meet some of these needs? How many times per year?
In the last year, I've had to travel to Oklahoma quite a bit. Sometimes a couple of times a month because we had an office. I had an office that didn't have a provider there, and so it made sense because I get to go see my family. So it was an easy decision for me.
That's quite a practice area you have.
Dr. Thompson, this is Dr. Bircher.
Yes.
If you were traveling to Kansas or DC to fill in, do you intend on seeing patients, or is most of that work going to be administrative?
I would intend on seeing patients if I came out.
Thank you.
Dr. Thompson, it's Dr. Lozada again. Is any of this done, are you seeing patients in person in the same room?
Yes. Yes.
So this is not some sort of remote telemedicine type setup?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members?
Yes, I have a question.
You can proceed.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Thompson, my name's Tim Racer. I'm legal counsel to the board.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I did have a question. When Googling your name, it appears that, well, your LinkedIn, if I've found the right person, identifies you as a national director for Academy Kids Vision and Adventure Vision.
Yes.
That's accurate?
Yes.
Can you give us an overview of that role and what your duties are?
So what we really do is we provide dental, vision, and orthodontic care to low-income kids. That's our mission. When I went to school, I really fell in love with community health and taking care of those that had a hard time getting access to care. And so when I found Academy Kids, it really worked well for, what my drive was, what my passion was. And so optometry director, I kind of helped to oversee our optometrist We hope to hold them to a clinical standard, do clinical reviews on them internally to make sure that the desires that I have for patient care are being met by any providers that are associated with Academy Kids and Adventure. And so that's where the administrative side comes in. But though I am proficient in looking at spreadsheets and all of that access, I'd much rather be in clinic, dealing with the kids. And so that's where that kind of balance between the administrative and the clinical side, comes in, is getting out there, doing some coverage, doing some fill in, but being in the clinic, getting to see the kids. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. And I just had one additional question where Dr. Lozada had asked you about the number of hours a week that you had worked, and your answer was around 20 to my recollection. And that's in clinic. Is that consistent with your practice over the past 3 years, or has that been different as far as the hours weekly?
That's probably low over the course of the last 3 years. I would say over the last 3 years, I would probably say it was more, 80% of the time in clinic. And over maybe the last, 4 to 6 months, we've gotten more positions filled. And so that's come back just a little bit, but I'm still in clinic, I'd say 50 to 60% of the time.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
This is Dr. Nagaraja. This is partly for my own information. So if she does decide to practice at one of the locations in Kansas, she does need to alert us to that, correct? Okay.
Dr. Thompson, what locations would you be practicing in Kansas?
Now we have a couple of locations in Wichita and a location in Topeka. So right now, those would be the options. It's called Adventure Vision. Moving forward, like I said, if I'm not doing this forever, I have several friends that have said, hey, you know what, if you ever decided you just wanted to do fill-in work, I'm always looking for people. So, but that would be obviously much in the future when I don't have to do this all day, every day.
I understand what you're saying about fill-in work in DC, Oklahoma, and Kansas. But then the obvious problem is that once you leave Colorado Springs, then there's no one to care for the patients at that location. So it's a circle.
It is a little bit of a circle. I do have some, I won't say extra providers, but we have, if I have a location here where I have 2 providers, then I can flex one provider over to another location if somebody here needs to leave and go someplace else.
Thank you.
Yeah. Our goal is to not have to close the doors anywhere, especially when, parents are taking a day off of work and trying to get their kids in to have all of these things taken care of. I really want to make sure that I can provide that service to them on the day that they're there and not make the parents have to take another day off, figure out how they're going to get, some of them have transportation issues. And so we really try to make sure that I can take care of everything I can with each patient that day.
Mr. Resner, she raises some really interesting questions. How would we address location on the license registry? Because 1 week she might be in the area to be in Kansas City and then a month later in Wichita. So would she have to continuously update the database?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a rule that essentially states before you engage in the practice at a certain location, the licensee has to notify the board. You then have the trade name issue where the holder of the trade name is required to notify regarding who is practicing under the trade name at each location.
Yes.
I'm sorry. May I request an executive session at this time?
Here you go.
What do I need to do?
Okay, so this is technically a CAPA proceeding. And so you can close session without, the coma justifications like consultation with legal counsel. So, I mean, it's more or less just a motion to go into closed session to discuss, the application, I suppose, is what you would be asking.
So I need to make a motion. Okay. I move to move into a closed executive session to discuss the application. 10 minutes? Returning at 2:10. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Dr. Thompson, if you don't mind staying on hold, we will dismiss to executive session and return at 2:10. All right, it is 2:10 and we are coming out of closed session. Dr. Thompson, we just have a few more questions for you. Can you tell us who is your employer, if it is Academy Kids or Adventure Vision or Hero?
My employee is Academy Kids. It's actually Your Child's Eyes doing business as Academy Kids because of the location I was at, because of how long that location, we've had that one. There's been a name change, but Academy Kids Vision.
And you are familiar with Dr. Michael Ferris?
Yes.
Do you know if Dr. Ferris is currently practicing in the state of Kansas?
He has his license there, but he is not there. He is in Colorado.
And he practices full-time in Colorado?
He does similar to myself, where we, provide some fill-in around, and he's not in Kansas very often.
Okay, so he's like half administrative, half clinic?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Thompson, Dr. Lozada again.
Yes.
I'm looking at the Academy Vision's website. There's nope. Three optometrists. Oh, I almost included the dentists. Who all in the practices the way you do, which is basically multi-state? You, Dr. Ferris?
That's about it. We're the only two that do that on any sort of regular basis.
And no one in the other states does that?
Dr. Tran, who you may see there, Dr. Christopher Tran, who's in Kansas, he has gone to Oklahoma for us, I think once, but I'm trying to think because I don't want to misspeak. That's the only thing I can think. I know we have several optometrists that have licenses in multiple states for one reason or another, but I think Dr. Tran has gone to Oklahoma once that I can think of ever, and other than that, it's Dr. Ferris and myself.
Thank you.
Any other questions from legal counsel or board members?
No questions. Dr. Thompson, I just want to remind you that prior to practicing in the state, be sure to update the locations with the board, with Jan Murray.
Yes, ma'am.
And you can either do that now or just make sure it's done prior to engaging in practice in Kansas, since they weren't listed on your application.
And how much advance notice would you guys like to have?
Ideally, I think you can list all the locations in Kansas now. That way they are an option.
Okay. Yeah, I can absolutely get that information to Jan.
Okay. Well then, I make a motion to accept the license for reciprocity for Dr. Lori Thompson.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign? All right, thank you, Dr. Thompson. Your application for reciprocity has been approved.
Great, thank you all very much.
All right, at this time, I think I will recommend that we take a break. And let's take a 10-minute break and return at 2:25. Ms. Murray, I'll let you take over.
So next up on my agenda is to review all the forms, and I gave you out a little packet with all of the updated forms. I don't know if you want to go through each of them individually, or if we just want to do a blanket. I do have one question on the trade name application. And it just concerns two questions that are on there. I think one can be deleted, but I want to see which one you like first. So on the first page of the trade name application, down at the very bottom, the question is, do you intend to actively engage in the practice of optometry under the trade or assumed name upon obtaining approval from the board? And then on page 3, in the middle of the thing, it's he or she intends to actively engage in the practice of optometry under the trade name or assumed name applied for if approved within 6 months of approval. To me, they're the same questions, but it's just like, which one do you like better?
Is there a reason for the 6-month?
In the reg, it states that if they have not used it in 6 months, that it is no longer valid.
They have not used it, or if they have not practiced under it?
Let me get right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would recommend we keep the 6 months question.
Okay. I'll get rid of the other question then. But other than that, I think that we added the terminology, the perjury statement on all of the forms. By perjury, I swear and affirm under the penalty of perjury, the information given herein is true and correct to the best of my knowledge and belief. I think that's got added to all of the online forms.
This was a project that I started along with Mr. Resner's review and Dr. Durst. The idea was to have consistency with the forms. Some of them had a perjury statement, some of them did not. Some of them needed additional clarification, like on the trade name. Mr. Resner recommended that we actually print KAR 6581, which is a sort of a standards, addresses standards. And so the whole idea is to update these forms for consistency and to request information that over the years the agency has realized are important. One thing I do want to bring to the board's attention, and that is if you look at the reciprocity application, which is seems to be the thickest.
The license for application for the exam is the thickest.
Yeah, it's 3 pages. If you look at item 7, which will be 6 in the future, it says proof of 48 hours of continuing education in the 2 years prior to the application. It does not state what type of hours. On our license renewal, there's certain requirements, maximum number of online hours, maximum number of practice management hours, maximum hour of surgery observation. This just says 48. Ms. Murray brought up a really good point when I asked her about this. And she said, well, 2 years ago, maybe this individual wasn't thinking of getting a Kansas license, so it's pretty hard to apply those standards. then the question is, how do we address the fact that we have two different standards for the agency?
For one, they're not licensed yet, so they shouldn't have to abide by the regs if they're not licensed.
I worry that we're subject to other current state optometrists complaining that the conditions aren't equal. I'm a very black and white person. If we choose to say they must be the same as current Kansas optometrists, they're just not eligible. So then they come and take the test in July.
It depends a little bit on the mechanism too, because under House Bill 2066, I don't think you could impose that requirement on an out-of-state licensee. I mean, if you're talking about the same types and the live requirement, which may be different than other states. I mean, if they're a traditional applicant, you know, maybe, but I don't think that you have a current mechanism in the law that says you have to have this, you know, meet the same CE requirements as, you know, I think your statutes or regs that relate to the issue, they speak to a renewal applicant as opposed to a reciprocity applicant.
So, and something else the board might consider is the CELMO certificate, because to get that, they have to have 50 hours of CE to get the CELMO, and they are specific as to the categories as to what they need. They need so many hours under this and that. And so that is something to look into, is the CELMO certificate. And I am on the CELMO committee at ARBO, and I kind of told them we'd be a guinea pig for like the January meeting, and they would come and do a presentation via the internet on whatever, on what the CELMO certificate is and what it could do for us if we started requiring that instead of all this other stuff.
Sorry, what is this certificate?
It's called CELMO.
Spell that. Thank you.
It's,
It's
hang on.
it's an ARBO system. It's a database, isn't it?
No. CELMO is the Council on Endorsed Licensed Mobility for Optometrists, is what it's called. And they have to meet all these criteria. ARBO would get all of the transcripts and stuff, you know, before they would issue the statement. Like I said, there are a whole bunch of hoops that the applicant must go through in order to get the CELMO. And once they do, then if they presented us with the CELMO, we could look at it and say, okay, if you've jumped through all these hoops with ARBO, then yeah, we could license you. But
So it's a universal,
they're trying to make it kind of a universal type thing.
something we also may need to consider is if we do put a stipulation on it, even Kansas allowed all virtual hours in the last 3 years. So we'd probably have to put a timeline on when that would be changing.
Getting back to the comments by Mrs. Murray and Mr. Resner, I think, if I'm understanding the two of you correctly, it seems that we're going to have two standards because these are unlicensed individuals who are applying, not licensed in Kansas, and that how would the CE standards apply to them? The other issue is that it could be looked at as restraint of trade to require that. So addressing the concerns of Dr. Bircher, I would say that we have two standards and that the reasoning would be that people who apply to Kansas are not subject to Kansas rules and regs until they have a license.
And I don't know that you'd be too dissimilar from other, you know, licensing acts by having a second standard. I mean, I think it's pretty typical that for a reciprocal applicant, you simply want them to be in good standing in their home state or reciprocal state and have met, you know, those requirements up to that point in time. So it's an interesting question, I think, for you all to figure out. I'd be interested to know, though, how other states have treated it and how I know of some, but how other licensing bodies, too, in the state have treated that issue.
I'm not even sure what the CE requirements are for other state reciprocity law licenses.
Going by the executive director's meetings that I have attended, we're one of the few states that requires CE to be licensed.
Wow. So we actually have higher standards, even if they're different from annual license or biannual license renewal. So anyway, this was a lot of work between Dr. Durst, Mr. Resner, Mrs. Murray, and I. And if the, I'm sorry, I'm taking over for you, Mrs. Murray.
Well, that's okay. You wanted it under yours, and I just kind of left it under mine.
Would we need to have a motion to approve the changes, or can we just go ahead and post them online?
I think that's up to you. I don't recall if you approved by motion form changes in the past, but I mean, certainly if you want to put it to a motion, that would be just fine.
I have one more quick question.
Certainly.
Is it necessary to ask about glaucoma certification?
If they were licensed prior to 1999, it wasn't part of their education.
Even in other states?
Even in other states, they may not have their glaucoma. In fact, we had an exam applicant a few years ago that he qualified for reciprocity, but because he did not have any glaucoma experience, the board made him come and sit for the exam.
That was going to be my next question. Okay.
There's actually been other instances. There was a reciprocity around 2015, 2016, graduate in early 90s, I believe. And I asked the questions about glaucoma, and when we went into the details, this particular person was working at a surgery center with ophthalmologists treating glaucoma in their state. So even though they didn't meet the requirement of the year that they had graduated, they were already treating glaucoma in their home state.
Would anyone like to make a motion?
I would like to make a motion to accept the changes to the forms that are posted online.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. And motion has passed.
Next on my agenda is setting the 2024 exam date, because you guys set it in July, except for Country Stampede is now going to be July 18th and 20th, which just happen to be the same dates that we picked for the exam dates for 2024.
Do you know when Arbo is?
Arbo is in June. Arbo is June 16th through the 18th.
I don't remember why we turned down July 12th. That is my proposed date. Do I have a motion?
I propose that the board choose July 12th and 13th for the 2024 licensure by examination.
Do you have any,
Did we time it because of board scores?
I think it might have been that we were thinking that was the weekend that Country Stampede was going to be, because that would make a sense, because it was the same weekend that it would have been this year, except for they moved it back a week.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was what it was, is that we were thinking that would be the weekend of Country Stampede. And so that's why we made it the week after that. And then Country Stampede's switch their dates up on us. I think that's coming back to me. That's why we did what we did.
My opinion is we will not be making our decisions based on when does NBEO release their scores. Sorry.
The board at one time moved it to June just because they figured everybody graduates in May and they could start practicing sooner. And that's why it got moved at one point from July to June, was for that reason. And now it's back to July.
I think let's plan on July 12th right now, unless something comes up.
Well, no, there was a motion made.
Oh,
Did we vote?
Me, second? Second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We will set the 2024 exam date for July 12th, 12th and 13th. Thank you.
Okay, next up on the agenda is the Continuity of Operations Plan, COOP. The governor signed an executive order earlier this year that said all the agencies needed to have their COOP plan up to date. And so I have been working on it. I think I posted the final draft of it online. It's 100 pages and it's not, you know. So I just need to make sure that the board is okay with what I printed or out there. Most of what's the 100 pages is boilerplate. I just had to add in the names and different things, procedures that were specific to our agency.
Do you have a deadline for this to
You
be?
already signed the thing.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted you to know that it's out there. It needs to be done by the end of the year. And last time that I had it graded, we were at 89% or 99% with just the approval letter being needed to be sent out. We would be at 100% complete in compliance. So, yeah. And then to look at it once a year to make sure that it's up to date with name changes and stuff. And
Is this an FYI or do we need another motion to approve this? Can we move?
the letter that you signed that came straight from KDM just said that it was approved by the president of the board.
Okay.
You probably should vote on it.
Will do.
Yeah.
I would like to make a motion to approve the continuity of operations plan provided by Ms. Murray. Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Next up, I'm getting there, is I have the approvals from Department of Admin and the AG's office for KAR 65-5-14, which is the biannual renewal of switching it from, if they have an odd number, license number, they renew in the odd years, and an even number, they renew in the even years. So that makes my revenue more even distributed between the 2 years, instead of having it high one year and low the next year. And so we need to set a date, needs to get published in the Kansas Register 60 days prior to the hearing date. And when I was doing my little math and whatever, any date after December 31st would work. So it could be at the next board meeting in January.
For some reason, that is not showing up in my calendar.
Yeah, we have not set up a January meeting yet, which is why it's not showing in your calendar.
I would recommend we do it at the next January meeting.
Yep. Yep, I just need a date so I can get it published in the register and
I was just going to say I'll be I won't be available the second week of January.
And it looks like legislature starts January 8th.
So we want to do it after?
Prior to, otherwise,
Prior to?
yeah, I could probably still get a room. I just wouldn't know what room I could get. You know, it'd have to be a room where nobody's using it at the time. Or I can find a new location. I could probably get a room over in Landon.
Tell me about, I don't know the state's policies on the holiday, meaning Monday will be closed, which is January 1st, and they will be open again January 2nd.
Right, January 1st is closed, right? And looks like they will also be closed January 15th for Martin Luther King Day. And I can look into a different, if I can't get someplace in the Capitol, I can look to see if I can get in another state office building a room.
Well, that leaves us with Wednesday, January 3rd,
Or,
if we want to do before, unless we want Jan to find a separate room.
yeah. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Wednesday. It could be whatever day of the week that you would like. The board used to meet on Fridays. Fridays in the attorney's office, so.
Are you offering, Tim?
You're always welcome.
Are they nice?
Hmm?
I said, are your offices nice?
I think they're okay.
I would say so.
If Friday works better for, that's your day off.
No, it's remote work Friday.
If Wednesday works for you, I'm open to Wednesday. All right. Do you want to do an 8 o'clock meeting or a 1 o'clock meeting?
Whatever you guys want.
Let's tentatively do 1 o'clock, and that might change.
Are we looking at the 3rd?
Yes. You're welcome to join us, Gerard, as a public, attendee.
It's kind of you.
He might even still be on the board by then. Who knows?
So we're saying 1 o'clock on the 3rd here, the Capitol?
Yeah, if I can get a room.
Pending.
Yep.
I accept your invitation.
Okay. And then the last thing that I have is the call log. Dr. Lozada suggested that I start keeping a call log. And so, which I have for like the last month. A lot of my phone calls recently have been concerning trade names and licenses, whether or not, you know, same person, but I've had issues with mailing out licenses this year that for some reason, either they gave me the wrong address, they didn't give me the complete address, or I mailed it to the right thing, but the mailman didn't deliver it to them, type thing. But, you know, same old, but I have a call log if anybody wants to look at and see what I've been dealing.
How many phone calls were you able to log?
I don't know, probably about 24.
How many? 24?
It's a slow period in time. In fact, yesterday I got a phone call from my accountant at the service center, and I had her programmed in on my phone, so it showed up her name. And today when I went to log in and the thing, it said it was a potential spam, and it was a state number.
So what are you putting in the log? You're putting the date
The date, the time, the number, if it shows up on caller ID, and who,
and the individual.
and then what they wanted.
Okay. So the idea for the call log was so that, as Dr. Bircher said earlier, so we have a note, we have some sort of action items, I think was the term you used. We have some sort of way to go back and review this. Do the board members want to have access to look at the call log It could be on the board members only page.
Or I could just give you access through, or, no, I've just lost it. However, I gave you access to the applications. I could share access to it.
I think that I would suggest doing so because a phone call might appear that,
I could share my file, that's it. I
we
could
go.
share it, that's it.
that one of the board members may have additional information in regard. The only question is, how do we maintain confidentiality on investigations? Because obviously, we wouldn't be able to post the caller, only the investigator would know those sorts of details. So we'd have to put limits on phone calls involving complaints so that the whole board is not exposed to information, and therefore we can maintain our quorums. That's the only additional item I see.
And I have had a couple of phone call complaints, and I've told them to file me a written complaint, because a couple of them, I weren't sure if they were actually ophthalmologists or optometrists, and they weren't sure. And I know from previous dealings that if they call the Board of Healing Arts, Board of Healing Arts will hear, I care, and they will send them to me. And so then it's a vicious cycle. So it's like, send it to me, I'll figure out who it goes to, and I will forward it on.
So you're still logging those?
Yeah, but I haven't seen the written complaints yet. But
Any other items for our attention? All right. All right, the dreaded regulation update. Is this something that you can share with us on the screen, Stan?
yeah.
I think you also gave us a printed copy, is that correct?
Well, with the exception of the first one, because Tim sent a revised one, right, as I was leaving, so
Yep.
you should have that in your email.
I do.
Down some.
All right, we can go ahead and start with 65-5-6.
For me to share my screen, I need to log in. I got it. Yep.
So the main change to this is Tim has changed our definition of live presentation to clarify how many hours are needed. So if you could review that.
Would it be helpful to quickly summarize? I think it's paragraph B that we're concerned about.
Yes, please.
Okay. So, I mean, the way it would now be written, and that includes the highlight that hopefully you have the version in your email. So 12 of the 24 annual hours may be obtained through courses that are not live. The next sentence talks about no more than 4 hours or a maximum through observing surgery, but the observation hours are not considered live and then maximum of 4 for practice management. And then the live presentation definition is altered,
Go back and
essentially to say that the licensee has to be physically present in the same room as the moderator or presenter. I don't know that the final sections were important, but to comment and ask questions in real time.
So what Tim is referring to has been emailed to you and is not what Jan has printed.
Thank you. Let me look it up. Because there was a correction to make, and then I was looking at it and saying, well, it's not there.
Just as an FYI, every time somebody talks, I lose it comes down, so.
I have kind of a random question. This happened once prior to all of this being an option. I had a CE where the presenter was unable to come because of their flight cancellation or weather or something like that. And they ended up doing it via video presentation. I know it's very specific, but that'd just be kind of a wah-wah. Too bad for you? Okay. I know it's really specific, but it happened once, and this was before remote CE was a thing, and so it wasn't an issue, but now. Okay. Okay. But in theory, if that happened, and it was reported. Okay.
I like the new definition.
One other thing I think that's kind of gnawing on me is I think it's the final, did I just kick your? So the final sentence in B, it says that courses, including those presented through the internet, by correspondence in journals or other publications, and by presentation that is recorded, shall be subject to the limitations specified in this subsection. I assume we're getting at the live requirement, right? So, I mean, would it be simpler and plainer just to say shall not be considered live presentation?
I got kicked out. Hold on.
I agree. I was also reading that, thinking that as well.
That simplifies it tremendously.
The other limits aren't pertinent, but I suppose it's maybe a touch confusing to someone reading it. Yes, the very last sentence where it starts courses, including those, right after the highlight. Those different types of CE, simpler just to say, shall not be considered live presentation. I mean, maybe it's being a little redundant, but I think it's clearer than the limitations specified in this subsection.
We need redundancy.
My only concern in section E is we did go down in the hours for notification for board approval, and that 14 days would possibly be challenging for me if I have to look up references. As the secretary treasurer, if you're out of town for an ARBO meeting and you're seeing patients, would you like more than 14 days?
Yes.
So I recommend we split the difference, and we were at 60 and do maybe 30 days?
30.
Unless you'd prefer the full 60 days.
No, 30. 30 is good.
Did you catch that, Jan? Okay. Do we want to peel through this together really quickly, or has everyone reviewed it enough by this stage.
soon as I get her application, but she's planning on moving to Kansas in January. So. But, no, that NB, that's him.
Are we all right moving along to telemedicine?
All right. Moving on with the regulation update. Dr. Sparks, myself, Dr. Durst, Mr. Resner have been working on this teleoptometry guidance. This is originally written by the Minnesota Board of Optometry. What Dr. Sparks and I did was to take that document and apply Kansas law to it, because there were some portions that were in Minnesota law, not in Kansas law, and there was some Kansas law that was missing. After that, Dr. Durst reviewed, made her suggestions. And so then the fourth set of eyes was Mr. Resner. And what you have here is our final tentative copy. So I will leave it open to discussion. I'll just say right off the bat, the change from teleoptometry from telemedicine was a great idea. Do you want to? Okay. You can go ahead and start. Or do you want me to just read it? Okay. Only one mic on at a time.
1A, 1B, or 1C. And then moving forward with Part E, I do think we need to address contacting the doctor. I do not intend to give my cell phone number to my patients.
I mean, people who in other states practice teleoptometry, they must have some sort of office or contact number, yeah. Because we're talking about, in this case, are we talking about, let's say I have a patient who I see in person, and then I do, let's say, a health visit. Is that the situation we're discussing? Because it kind of talks about establishing that relationship soon versus someone providing telehealth to someone in a completely location, as far as like, you know, like across the state or something. So when I think of teleoptometry or telehealth, I'm thinking almost of like remote exams that people are doing. We're not talking about that. Or are we? Does my question make sense?
We're trying to make a distinction between a licensee having contact with a patient who they already have a relationship with, as opposed to a website, which may or may not be in Kansas, which may or may not be in the United States.
Can we just eliminate the last paragraph of the highlighted pink? And just say that the optometrist examining the patient is accessible for urgent or emergent issues that arise outside of normal business hours, period. The highlighted in pink. I'm not really sure what the definition of direct contact information would be, in addition to, can we not just say emergent issues that arise outside the normal business hours, period? That's fine.
If I might ask, how are emergent issues handled at your practice? Because there are going to be surgical complications that may occur.
So from the hours of 7:30 to 5, we have a live person answering and triaging calls. And then we have a answering service that runs 24 hours a day that patients actually leave a live message. The doctor on call is contacted, listens to the message, and then calls the patient back.
But is that because you have surgeries done, like at another eye clinic? Is that available after hours contact?
Yes, that's because of the nature of the practice where Dr. Bircher is located.
We actually have a lot of issues because local optometrists put on their answering machine if it's an emergency to call us, which there's a lot of legal ramifications with that. So it's been a big problem. Or if it's an emergency, hang up and call Kansas City Eye Clinic. Wrong answer. Gerard, do you not currently have a after-hours phone service?
We have our cell phone numbers on the answering machine. If this is an emergency and you are a patient of Dr. So-and-so, please call. If you are a patient of Dr. So-and-so, please call, and the number is listed.
And my prescription for Loprednol is out. Will you please call it in? You'll respond to that over the weekend?
We specify only eye emergencies. I've
This
only
is
had
emergent. My doctor told me to use it every day.
I've only had that happen once, and it was a patient who was traveling, and I had to call in their prescriptions to Minnesota because they had gone 2 days without their medications, and on day 3, things were falling apart. But everything else has always been eye injuries of all sorts of things.
Yeah, so instead of like direct contact information, should it say they have to have some ability for after hours contact? Maybe they have a call center or something.
It says that
I would
it's in there.
agree.
Doesn't it say or personal answering service number? Doesn't that cover that?
We could have something like provide the patient a means to contact the optometrist after hours. Just leave it as simple as that.
I think we can do that by just eliminating that last paragraph. That's highlighted in pink, so you would just put business hours, period, and eliminate this may be accomplished by providing X, Y, and Z.
So you're saying you would start E(2) with be accessible for urgent and delete everything before that?
And then also in E Part 3, I'm not sure of the goal of this statement. And also, if you're doing telemedicine, how are you supposed to provide this in written form? Unless you're just emailing them or texting this information to them.
Would it be sufficient to remove the words in written form?
Is there some sort of written guideline somewhere that has the pros and cons? Like, I don't even know if I would know exactly what would be expected there.
In general, I think that when the patient calls for help, there is a, Tim, you can correct me, an underlying verbal consent that they're agreeing to telemedicine, teleoptometry exam. I just think it's contradictory, signed and dated and provided to the patient in written form is challenging when the patient's in Minnesota.
It's a longtime patient. Patient I've known for a decade and a half. So I think this is designed more to address the new patient who has no relationship with the licensee. And maybe that's where the problem is that it's too encompassing. So something that would guide section E to the new patient and not an established patient. And we could do that right where E is. It could start off for patients who are not established, the optometrist must.
So you would still recommend for a new patient having the information in writing?
Well, that's just a suggestion. That's just a suggestion.
I mean, are you concerned about the written, signed, dated portion of, because I think, again, these are guidelines, so it's not a statute or regulation that thou shalt do this. But it is, you can certainly make it verbal, that they've advised them of the pros and cons of, the limitations of teleoptometry. Because I think that is a good practice for everyone. If you're looking at, the interests of the patient, absolutely. They need to be informed. It's good for the optometrist to cover their bases there as well. It'd be best practice to have a signed document for the optometrist, because then if there's ever a question of whether you did it, you have the writing which demonstrates that it happened. Because otherwise it's going to be they never told me that, unless you're recording your encounters or whatever it may be.
I guess it's challenging when you have a patient calling from out of town saying, my eye is red, my eye hurts, I have green gunk coming out of my eye, and you say, I'll call you back after I receive your written consent form. How does that happen at midnight on Sunday?
Mm-hmm.
Which for you guys is not a lot. For me, it's quite often.
That's exactly the reason why we're going over this. Right now, we have nothing. We have no guidelines.
Is this something that our goal is to put it on the board website or?
And as Mr. Resner said, it's not a policy, it's not a statute, it's not a regulation, it's a guideline. Do you want to table this until January?
Or maybe we could be ready at the next meeting.
Sounds good. And to clarify, we want to have better wording for section E.
Yeah, I think we could write, to your point, it's a good point. And so for E(3), it could be, advise the patient of the pros and cons, and then indicate it, best practice would be you get it in writing, because, at the end of it, it's a CYA for the optometrist. Mm-hmm. And it also demonstrates that the patient's been fully advised, which the board should be concerned about. It's not necessarily a mandate, because you're not mandating anything through this. You're trying to provide guidance to practitioners that, here's how you can comply with Kansas law when you're doing this.
Is it adequate to tell the patient, I'm going to send you a form, and within the next 14 days, you need to return it to the office?
Yeah, I mean, I think and I guess the question for you all is, do you want to be that detailed here, or just leave it up to their, common sense as how they put it in place? I don't think there's a right or wrong answer there, but it just comes down to, I mean, you all get it, the realities of what you do.
All right, let's table this until we have our next remote meeting, and then let's move on to active practice. Which I believe is online. Is that correct, Tim?
I think so.
I'll just comment that several of these items we considered earlier today.
And Madam Chair, if I may on this,
Yes.
I guess just a couple, because we've looked at this a few times in the past, and as a refresher, it's, when we drafted this, we looked at the Board of Healing Arts has a definition, and so we use that to sort of advise what this could look like, and we consulted with the KOA about the draft and made some changes based on, I think the one that comes to mind is C1, where we struck residency or fellowship from what doesn't qualify as active practice. And then there have been some questions too about the computation of 1 full day per week for at least 50 weeks, and then a total of 400 hours, which are essentially the same thing, just building some flexibility in.
And were these new changes added to the new application form as well?
Yeah, I think the term active practice is there, but it's always been a question of what does it mean?
Sure.
Yeah. But then you find that in several different places in your law, as far as one being the reciprocity, 3 years of active practice. I think that's the most pertinent that I can think of.
Okay. I think it looks good. Any other questions or concerns with active practice? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the framework for reciprocal license active practice requirements. It does not yet have a KAR designation will be assigned one.
And I think you're asking Jan to move it along in the process.
Yes.
To get it started.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right. Moving along, any comments from the public today?
Sure. So Todd Flusher with K-Way. Just one thing to be aware of. We're continuing to work with the DMV. We traveled around the state the last couple of weeks, and we're hearing a lot of our doctors that are still concerned about filling out the current DMV forms because there's some potential liability there with indicating that a driver is safe to operate a vehicle based on the exam, and the optometrists are consistent that they are able to determine their visual skills, not necessarily their ability to operate a vehicle. So we're trying to make sure that we get that clarified with the state. Based on a lawsuit that happened, we thought we fixed it legislatively, but there's still some rules and regs that we need to get worked on, and actually have a meeting scheduled for in the coming week to work with the department. They're identifying some of the challenges with that, so we're working through that process, but that may be something that if you get calls at the state board, we're definitely aware of it and we're working on it. So it's something that's going to be an issue probably for a little while that could affect a lot of patients, honestly, because it could affect their ability to get a license if they don't get those forms filled out. So anyway, that's kind of it on that. So, all right, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim, do you have a report from the legal counsel?
Yeah, briefly, I guess I can talk about our oral argument in the Abbey case yesterday. We were third up. Dr. Lozada attended. Appreciate any insights you had, but the court was very hot. They asked a lot of questions. I think I was about 20 seconds in, and I got my first question. May not have even been 20 seconds. But I think we had a really good conversation. The goal was just to go in there and make sure that the perspective of the board through the final order was clear to them, and then identify some pertinent issues that need to focus them on. And, you know, one was this dual discipline issue that you all have been dealing with. And I think that's probably, you know, I didn't have a clock on me. There was the clock that you have to look at wasn't running, so I didn't see how I was doing in my time. But I mean, I think we spent the bulk of our time, I would guess, addressing the dual discipline issue. And it was more making sure that, you know, the judges were making sure that they understood, you know, what the issues were for them to decide, because it's really nuanced. I mean, you have, from our perspective, the optometry law and then the professional corporations law, and so you have a set of statutes there that you're trying to reconcile. And then in addition, you have the Board of Healing Arts, the Healing Arts Act that also came into play here. So it's not a straightforward thing, and so we really just spent a lot of time on that. They were focused on the ancillary issue too, is when is the practice of optometry ancillary to the practice of medicine when there's a relationship with an ophthalmologist. And so you know, that I think that'll be interesting. They really focused in on that, and you know, there's quite a bit of argument on it. You know, the other issue dealing with the optical, I don't know as much. It was more dealing with the facts of the advertising, the signage, the physical setup that we went through. So, I mean, I think overall I was pleased with how it went. I could kind of get a sense, I think, of the judge's thoughts, but at the same time, you know, their issue isn't to reveal how they think. It's more to make sure that they're asking questions and try to flesh out the issues. So went way over our time on argument, which was good. Another thing I just is maybe interesting is the Judicial Center, the Supreme Court, and the Court of Appeals were subject to a cyber attack, and so their database is down. They actually asked us after the oral argument if we could provide a paper copy of the record on appeal, which they already have. They've had it for months. I guess they just can't access it, which is unusual, but we're facilitating that for them.
Can you walk us through what to expect process-wise, what happens?
Oh, yeah, thank you. So, I mean, the standard time period that they advertise, and I don't know that it's always the case, but 60 to 90 days until we receive a written decision. I would guess it may be a little bit longer than that, but, I mean, we're probably looking at sometime after the first of the year is when, maybe February of when we'd receive a written decision on the appeal.
And it's done, or there's more options for more appeals, or?
Yeah, there would be an option for either party after that to appeal to the Supreme Court. The appeal to the Court of Appeals it's compulsory. They have to take it up. The appeal to the Kansas Supreme Court that would be at the discretion of the court whether or not they would take it up.
What happens if the Supreme Court chooses not to?
Then the opinion of the Court of Appeals would stand and it would terminate the action. And, I guess for whatever it's worth, there's always the possibility of some kind of a remand back to the board, either to carry out instructions if that would be the decision of the court, if it would implicate it, or they could always send it to you for further action. So, I mean, it's, we'll just see what they say.
Anything else from you, Tim?
No, other than that, I mean, I request an executive session, but that's noted as the next section anyway. So.
You're requesting it?
I would, but I can't.
Just to know, can I say what for, or do I just say that we're in consultation with you?
Yeah, I mean, it would be to discuss, I think, a pending legal issue related to the exam.
All right, so I would like to request an executive session beginning at 3:40, going until 4 o'clock. And this is going to be for consultation with the board's attorney, Mr. Resner, which is deemed privilege in the attorney-client relationship.
You might also add, so the purpose would be to discuss a pending legal issue relating to the board exam.
So we will meet with the purpose of a pending legal exam, a pending legal question about the state board exam.
Is there a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion passed. All right, it is 3:58, and we are coming out of executive session. I believe we have dates for a January meeting. Do you need to set a date for the, no, I'm thinking the one that we'll have here in 30 to 45 days. Okay. I think it would be wise to set April while we're here.
Or do you want to wait until we get new board members to set that date?
Okay, Jan.
We can set a date in April, and I'll put it down, but just keep in mind, we're going to be getting 3 new board members.
And do we have a timeline for that?
Um,
Todd Fleischer, who doesn't submit any names to the state.
The public member, I'm told the director of appointments is working with someone, and I was told that I would have had it by this meeting, but did not happen yet.
Okay.
And then as soon as KOA submits their list of names to the director of appointments, then she will start working on that list. So I'm hoping by January we'll have new board members.
Well, any other comments from the board? Do I have a motion for adjournment? Sure.
As this might be my last board meeting, I wanted to just thank the board members over the years for everything that they've done for me. I have a very core belief, and that is that you are a better person by hanging out with people who are better than you, and I've managed to do that for the last 9 years. I want to thank all the previous board members, Dr. Ron Hansen, Doug Ayer, Rebecca Sparks, Laura Durst, Craig Newland, public members, please.
There was Derek
Kreifel.
Lois Churchill.
I was not with Lois Churchill.
Gary Slimmer.
Gary Slimmer. I believe that is everybody. I also want to thank Jan Murray. Ms. Murray has helped keep things in line all these years. I want to thank Mr. Resner and Mr. Randy Forbes. My use of the English language has improved tremendously. So thank you very much.
I apologize, I forgot your gavel.
That's okay.
All right, do I have an emotion for adjournment? A motion.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. And motion passes.